I'm not concerned about it beyond that.
That's pretty remarkable that you're not concerned about it, given the fact that they wanted to hang you on January 6th.
Over the weekend, Cenk, former Vice President Mike Pence, you'll recall him, once again minimized the fact that Trump supporters literally called for his hanging on January 6th during an interview with CNN's Dana Bash, and we're going to hear more of his answer in a second. First, though, we should give a little background, a little context. Here's a lead up to that, which is where Mike Pence brushes off Donald Trump's recent threatening rhetoric.
Donald Trump said this week, talked about how his supporters might react if he is charged and faces potential jail time.
I think it's a very dangerous thing to even talk about, because we do have a tremendously passionate group of voters, much more passion than they had in 2020, and much more passion than they had in 2016. I think it would be very dangerous.
Does that kind of rhetoric worry you?
Well, it doesn't worry me because I have more confidence in the American people and in the people in our movement. Look, it was one of the things that infuriated me on January 6th with what I saw, people ransacking the Capitol and engaging in violence against law enforcement officers down. I think that I would say not just the majority, but virtually everyone in our movement are the kind of Americans who love this country, are patriotic, or are law and order people who would never have done anything like that there or anywhere else.
Law and order people. These are people, as Dana Bash alluded to, who called for the hanging of Mike Pence. And you'll recall what that looked like. But of course, Mike Pence, Alfred E. Newman, what me worry? He is totally unmoved by this. It's almost like he didn't see it happen, even though he's seen it happen over and over again. Here's his reaction.
I'm sure the American people will respond in our movement in a way that will express, as they have every right to, under the First Amendment, to express concerns that they have about what they perceive to be unequal treatment of the law. But I'm not concerned about it beyond that.
That's pretty remarkable that you're not concerned about it, given the fact that they wanted to hang you on January 6th. I want to move on to the issues that you were talking about.
Well, Dana, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I want to say to you, there's been an effort to take those that perpetrated violence on January 6th and use a broad brush to describe everyone in our movement.
No, I didn't mean to do that.
I'm just here to tell you, it's not the case. The people in this movement, the people who rallied behind our cause in 2016 and 2020 are the most God-fearing, law-abiding, patriotic people in this country.
It's unbelievable to me that Mike Pence still holds this line and still thinks that that's the way to woo the people that support Donald Trump, who I can tell you, Cenk, from being out there among them with consistency for TYT and talking to them, they cannot bear the name Mike Pence because of the fact that he certified the election, that he thinks he can win them back by towing that line of remaining unconcerned. It's mind-bogglingly, I would say, tone deaf. Dana said it, she called it remarkable, but the notion that he could still hold this position is just, I cannot believe even Mike Pence or even some of these people would get to that space.
Yeah, all right, first the slightly funny thing. She says, they wanted to hang you on January 6th, but I want to move on. Well, so does he, by the way.
Right.
And then he says, well, look, I don't want to paint with a broad brush here. We've got our movement is very law-abiding and in favor of law and order. And then Dana Bash says, oh, no, I didn't mean to say that they are inclined in that direction. No, they are inclined in that direction. Is it all of them? No, of course not. But is it a lot of them? Yes. It's not just a couple of guys. So let me give you some of the stats about that. When they asked in a poll recently, Washington Post and University of Maryland, do you think it is ever justified for citizens to take violent action against the government, or is it never justified? 40% of Republicans said, yeah, justified. Now, to be fair, Tons of Americans believe that, and that's a problem with our general violent culture to begin with, where 34% of Americans, including a huge number of independents, go, yeah, sometimes we should do violence against the government. Okay, that's interesting. Didn't see that coming, at least outside of Republicans. But it's not just theoretical. Let me give you a different poll. Researchers at the Public Religion Research Institute found that 30% of Republicans agreed with the statement, quote, because things have gotten so far off track, true American patriots may have to resort to violence in order to save our country. So that one is not hypothetical or theoretical. That one is asking about today. 3 out of 10 Republicans, that is a mass, that's about 25 million people, say that, yeah, it might be time to resort to violence. So that is why it is not at all surprising that they chanted hang Mike Pence, and by the way, brought gallows and nooses. So they weren't playing, and it wasn't hypothetical for them either. So if you cross them, yes, an enormous percentage of Republicans say, we might have to do violence against you. And that is a very, very scary place for this country to be. And look, Mike Pence is obviously whistling past the graveyard there. I mean, 222. Didn't mean that pun, but there it is. And to be fair to him, he handled it like a champ on that day, right? And he was very strong and courageous on that day. But yes, this political strategy isn't going to work, but it's also hurting the country because we're pretending that there isn't this iceberg of a problem. And so I'm glad that Dana Bash brought it up, but like brushing it aside and going, no, it's not really a problem. No, the Republican voters are wonderful, patriotic, decent people. No, tons of them are, of course they are, right? But unfortunately, 30% of them are super dangerous. And if we're not honest about that fact, it's gonna hit us again. And the next time that iceberg hits us, it's gonna be worse.
Well, and by all accounts, Cenk, among those 30% of Republicans, going by what he has said, would be the leader for the nomination for president on the Republican side in 2024, which is the former president, Donald Trump. You'll recall that that his former chief of staff, Cassidy Hutchinson was the former chief of staff to Mark Meadows in the White House, said that Donald Trump thought that what was happening to Mike Pence was deserved. If I can remind you, this is Cassidy Hutchinson talking to the January 6th committee in Congress earlier this year or late last year.
I remember Pat saying something to the effect of, Mark, we need to do something more. They're literally calling for the vice president to be effing hung. And Mark had responded something to the effect of, you heard him, Pat. He thinks Mike deserves it. He doesn't think they're doing anything wrong.
I mean, he thinks Mike deserves it. That puts him into that 30% of people that you said were absolutely, essentially, I'm paraphrasing here, nuts, and think that the violence and resorting to violence is the way out of anything we don't disagree with. So I think when you look at what Mike Pence is soft pedaling here, and what he's dancing around rather than going right after in this interview with Dana Bash or with anybody on any campaign stump, is the fact that not only did Donald Trump sort of know what was going on, according to the January 6th committee findings, he also was someone who kind of pushed it and said that it sounds reasonable, and that desperate to hold on to power. You call it courageous with what Mike Pence did when he was vice president. That's the job of the vice president. Read it and count them. And once they were certified by the states, he just has to do it. And so, and then the other thing about Mike Pence is that even in this interview with Dana Bash, he was hesitant to call out Trump's own crimes leading up to the Capitol riot. He said, while his words were reckless based on what I know, I am not yet convinced that they were criminal. They don't really have to be criminal if they were reckless. He doesn't really even acknowledge their recklessness. Otherwise, he would respond with passion to Dana Bash when Dana Bash is talking about these people wanted to hang you. How do you just listen to that and brush it off?
Look, there's two things that I think that even with all the focus on January 6th by the media, by the Democrats, etc., two things that are being massively minimized. One is Trump saying, I think Mike deserves it, deserves to be murdered. That is unreal, that is colossal. He's saying his own vice president not only should be executed, but that the people saying that they're going to murder him on that day. And Trump says it on that day. His chief of staff comes in, Mr. President, I'm sorry, but your own supporters are trying to murder your vice president. And he says, I don't think they're doing anything wrong. And we're gonna go past, and Trump right now is leading the Republican primary by about 30 points and is very competitive in the general election. How could we let this monster back in? Because part of the reason is because we're so worried about offending the feelings of Republican voters. I'm not saying that we shouldn't try to understand them. I'm not saying we shouldn't try to reach out. I try to reach out to Republican voters because I think they hate corruption. So you can do both things at the same time, and you don't have to put all of them in the same basket, okay? And so yes, there are plenty of people on the right that you could reach out to. But if you ignore the 30% of the party has lost its effing mind, and they are definitively led by Donald Trump. I mean, look at this is the second major thing in that clip that we shouldn't brush past. Trump said in that tape that you heard with your own ears, if they arrested me and put me in prison, it could be more dangerous than 2020. What do you think he means by that? I know what Republicans are gonna say. They think he's an angel. He means that he'll throw marshmallows at people and we'll bring America back. And yeah, and it's the deep state will do all the bad things, dressed up as us. And then when you find out who it is, it's actually us and not the deep state. But it doesn't matter, we'll make up fantasies, right? But no, right there, for all rational thinking people, this monster of monsters who liked the violence that was done on January 6th, who didn't even mind his own vice president being potentially murdered, is saying, oh yeah, arrest me, and we'll have even more violence. Who do you think egged on that 30% to begin with? So that disease needs to be addressed within the Republican Party, but almost no one has the courage to do it, and certainly Mike Pence doesn't. So one last thing, guys, I'm gonna read you these quotes from about a different poll because I need you to understand what's going on inside the Republican Party. In December 2022 Political Morning Consult poll, 40% of Republican voters said Trump had, quote, no responsibility at all for the events that led to a group of people attacking police and breaking into the Capitol, while another 16% he wasn't too responsible. Only 14% of Republicans described Trump as very responsible for January 6th, compared to 45% of all voters. In total, only 31% of GOP voters said Trump was very or somewhat responsible, even though 59% of all voters assigned that level of responsibility to Trump. Now I read you all that. Bottom line on it is focus on one number. 31% of Republicans say that Trump was in any way responsible. The other 7 out of 10 Republicans say, Trump, January 6th, no. That was probably Dukakis, or Walter Mondale, or OJ, or Hugo Chavez, or Antifa, or the deep state, or my mom, or your mom. In fact, I read a different poll, Michael, that said a majority of Republicans believe the person who caused the riot against Joe Biden was Joe Biden. One political party has lost its mind here. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And we need to somehow get them back to sanity. But that is an enormously difficult process.
But we also, I think that there you can look at the half full glass there too and see that 59% of all voters, and that's a big number of American voters at a time when you can hardly get to 50% on anything, say that he is either very or somewhat responsible for January 6th. And going into an election year, yeah, that has to matter. I think that's an important number too, Cenk.
Yeah, that's true. And look, I do not want to take any chances, and I do not want Donald Trump, who I think is a full-blown fascist in these comments, totally proven, believes in political violence as a tool for his ambitions. I don't want him anywhere near the general election. But if he is in the general election, the only silver lining will be, and this is a giant if, because if it doesn't go this way, we'll lose the country. But if a Democrat shellacks him and ends him and says, okay, a giant rejection by the American people, that 59% actually has to show up and say, no, we're not letting this fascist, violent dictator wannabe who nonstop praises dictators, nonstop. He does it with North Korea, he does it with communist China, they refer to it, but he keeps saying, oh, I love the way she makes everyone stand for him, and no one's allowed to disagree with him, no one's allowed to dissent. I love that. Come on, guys, he's saying he's a fascist. Jesus Christ, wake up, Republicans. You went to go stop corruption and you wound up here with the biggest con man in American history, this fascist wannabe. So anyways, if he gets routed in an election, maybe then it ends and the Republicans decide to go in a different direction. But until then, by the way, if you're a Republican voter, you're nuts on a different count. You're gonna take a guy that 59% of the country thinks basically did a coup against America, and you're gonna run him in a general election? All right, I mean, I don't want it, and I think you'd be nuts to want it. But okay, if you wanna lose, have at it, Hoss. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.